Okay, I did actually forget one thing. That is down to starting the copter. So when you've powered it on and you've waited about a minute for it to power on, and your transmitter is also on and your switches are all back, the copter won't just go up in the air. You'll actually have to arm it before it'll go in the air. So let me just put these switches to their position, as I told you earlier. So all you'll do to arm the copter ready for flight is get this stick and hold it to the right bottom. And you'll have to wait usually about 10 seconds or so and keep holding it, and eventually the motors will all start spinning and then it's ready for flight. When the motors stop spinning, it means it's disarmed and won't fly until you arm it again. And it won't actually arm on an angle, it has to be level. It won't let you arm it if it detects that something's wrong. Okay, speak again. The reason it's armed now is because it's been sitting at the angle for so long. It's sort of like an adaptive thing. It thinks it's at a different angle, but that's things to note. You'll also notice the motors started spinning and then stopped spinning. That's because it disarmed because there was no input. So it'll only arm for a couple of seconds, and if nothing happens, it'll disarm itself. So one thing to always make sure is that if you're flying, like if it's in the air and for some reason you decide to cut the throttle, make sure you don't do it completely, because it might disarm while it's falling and then there's no chance of recovery, because when it's falling it won't then rearm. Again, I think that's it. Thank you for watching, and when you're done flying, you put your stick to the bottom left to disarm it. Goodbye. Hey there YouTube, today I'm doing a basic instructional video on using this copter. So this is mainly for the person who's purchasing this copter, Mr. Dave Dundon, but it will be useful for others, I suppose, especially if you've got a similar build or want to make a similar build. So I'll try and go over the basics as I remember them. Firstly, I have to unpack certain things. So the key things here are your controller and the video. Those are the two things that somebody starting out might find a little bit difficult to, how do you put it, to use initially. So that's what I'll be talking about. Let me just get my seat lower for this purpose. Okie dokes. So you have your controller. Now, whenever you're going to use your copter, you should always turn on the controller first. No matter what, controller turns on first and turns off last. So we'll turn it on. Straight away the copter will turn on, and you see this display here. Now you see here it says alert, and then it shows THR. What this means is one of these switches is forwards and it should be back, and that screen will only go when you click them back. So in this case, if I flip that switch back, it now goes onto the main screen. This main screen shows some information. The only really important stuff is that, which is the voltage of the battery in the controller. When that gets to 10 volts, it's time to charge the battery, otherwise you might find your copter falls out of the sky when the controller dies. That's all that's really important in that respect. The other importance is the screen at the top here, which is the FrSky telemetry. Now, this isn't actually doing that much. All it is doing is showing the battery voltage of the copter. So all you would do when you turn on your screen is you just push down that button, and that will come up with the voltage of your battery. Now, the batteries the copter uses are 4-cell, which means they've got 4 cells rated at 4.2 volts max, 3.3 minimum usually. I can't recall what that means for minimum flight battery. Let me think about this. 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12. So if your battery gets to 13 volts, that pretty much means land immediately, because it's going to crash otherwise or destroy your batteries. Generally, what is it? Generally, let's think about this. 14 volts is where you want to come down and land. But there will also be a battery alarm on the copter that beeps away if the batteries are getting low. So that's all you do, is push the button on that and make sure all your switches are backwards. Otherwise the radio won't power on. So once you've turned on your radio, you come to your copter. So the copter has 2 battery connectors on the back for 2 batteries in flight. So what you would do is you'd get 2 of your batteries, secure them in place, and then plug them in here. So if I'll just plug in one for now because it only needs one, and you'll notice a chime from the copter. So that means that the motors have acknowledged there's a connection with the flight controller. You'll also notice the gimbal's now going off. It will behave like that because there's no camera in there, but once the camera is in place it'll behave just fine. So that's unimportant at the moment. One thing for the user of this copter, this connector here is actually going to the gimbal. So if you ever want to fly without the camera in, just unplug that and the copter will still have power, but the gimbal will stay off, which just means you don't get the annoying noise. The other thing to point out is this connector here, which is the power for your video transmitter. Again, only connect this when you're going to use your video, otherwise tuck it in underneath the battery tray. And this would plug into one of your balance leads. So you'll have one balance lead going to your battery alarm and one balance lead going to your video connector. If you don't have that plugged in, your video just won't work. I can demonstrate that now, but you won't really notice anything because there's no camera connected to the video. But with that respect, because this is designed for a GoPro, I have a connector at the front, which is a plug that plugs into the side of the GoPro. So when you plug in the GoPro and plug in the transmitter, it should automatically start beaming your video. And the detector for that video is this device over here, which is a video receiver. So this requires a battery which uses one of these. So you get your video transmitter battery, video receiver battery, and you plug it into the cable adapter. If you hold on a sec. Now that that's plugged in, you'll plug it into the side of the video monitor. Sorry, having to do this with one hand. Let me plug that in. So that plugs in there, and now to turn on the video monitor, you press and hold that button there and it'll power on. Now the nice thing about this monitor is it has the ability to record the video. So if you put a SD card into the side and press the record button, it will actually record the video that's being transmitted to it. Now it's got a USB cable, or you can take the SD card out to view that video. So that's now powered up and waiting for a signal. You'll then power up your camera. So I'll just plug the video transmitter into one of the batteries. In this case I'll just use the display's battery. But when I connect that up, you'll notice the display will go black. Now it's going black because there's no camera plugged in, but if there were a camera plugged due to UK laws, you would go into flight plan and then you just tap where you want the copter to go, and you see it's joining the dots, and then you'd click right waypoints, and then you'd switch to autonomous mode in the copter and it would fly those waypoints. However, as I said earlier, not recommended. That's fairly simple, and if you want to start again, you would just click reset and you'd click new points. What else can I tell you about? There's nothing of any of importance otherwise. The other stuff isn't really relevant. Let me think. I think that's it. The only other thing to talk about is mechanical stuff, which I'll do in just a second once I put the computer out of the way and unplug it. So you can just unplug it, you don't have to click disconnect. I'll just do as a matter of course. So now we come on to propellers. So the motors have specified propellers. They have to have the correct kind of propellers, and to help with that, I've written onto the two front arms which propellers use. So this arm is anti-clockwise spinning. So you need a propeller that pushes air down when it spins anti-clockwise. And this one is the opposite, clockwise spinning, which means it needs air that pushes down when it's spinning clockwise. And the successive motors are opposite. So that's clockwise, that's anti-clockwise, and that's clockwise. And the same for that side. So all you need is to know the rotation of one motor, and then you know all the others. That is fairly imperative if you do that correctly. If you don't do that correctly, the copter won't fly and will crash. So make sure you do that properly. To actually fit the propellers, it's a fairly simple job. This little thing on the top unscrews. I don't think I can do it by hand, but this unscrews from the motor. So you'll hold the motor and unscrew this, slide your propeller on, and then screw this down, and then it's got little holes in it that you can see. That's so you can put like an Allen key or something and just tighten it enough so that when you're flying, the propeller doesn't come off. There's Loctite stuff in there that will help with that, but it's advised that you make sure it's tight. Don't go too tight though, because you might strip the bolt, because this stuff is aluminium, and aluminium unfortunately isn't great for keeping together should you tighten things too much. I think that's everything. The only other thing to point out is, again, back to charging, which is mainly down to the display screen. So you'll notice that this battery has a red connector rather than a yellow one, and that means it won't be able to plug into the charger's yellow port, but you need to. So that's what this special cable is for. This plugs into the red port of your battery and outputs a yellow plug so that you can charge this battery with the normal chargers. Again, it's very easy to do, and I've put the instruction manual for the charger in the box as well. And I believe that's it. There's several spare propellers in there, I think enough to replace all the propellers twice. And I can't think of anything else. As with the buyer and anyone else, if you do have any questions, feel free to message me and I'll get back to you fairly quickly. If you do message me on a weekend, don't expect to reply until the week, because I'm often very busy on a Saturday and Sunday. But aside from that, I believe that's everything. I will just point out again, as I said with the GoPro, it's got its connector here. It's just a mini USB that plugs into the side of the GoPro, and that should output your video just fine. And aside from that, there's nothing else to say. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.